thank you all for being here. I'm going to kick off with a presentation on the shapes of things to come. Why are we here all together? Why are we hearing people from like the tech side, like the true builders? Why do we have policy people? Why do we have like community builders? Like we have quite a different types of groups of presentations together. Like they're a little bit all over the place. And to make sense of it all, to connect it all together, I'm going to give you a short presentation on the shapes of what the atmosphere might become. But first, we go back to Twitter, and there's very many different ways that you can look at Twitter. They're all good, there's some, but I'm gonna pick out a very specific way because that frames what Blue Sky can become. And that's simply that Twitter was a way where communities and places became sort of an emergent property. And what I mean with that is like for a lot of people, Twitter was something you log into, like, and you just have a feed and you just get your dopamine and you scroll. Very exciting. But in a lot of ways, it's also where the first communities started to form, whether that was Black Twitter, whether it's Teapot, whether it's NBA Twitter, like you name it. Communities started to form. But also, we start to get a sense of place of what it is. And I think it's very interesting to see that people describe Twitter as like both a walled garden and also the town square. And places like a garden and a town square, they're very different places. Like, they don't really make sense to describe Twitter as like these two different places. And I think that's a sort of sense that we start to get the feeling that this is a place, but we don't really know what it is yet. So we have this very different sense of describing it. And then later, this is how I started writing about, I should have said that actually. I write a Fediverse report, which is a weekly newsletter on like, well, everything decentralized social networks. I started with the Fediverse, later got very interested in Blue Sky and AT-Proto as well. I still get very interested in the Fediverse because it made this idea of communities and places very direct, very explicit. What the Fediverse and what Mastodon said is like, a place is a server, like a physical server, and on that server there's one community. One community is one place, and they all connect with each other. It turns out, like, this gives you some very cool things you can do with that, with building communities. It turns out it also has some downsides, which I'm not going to get into. Give me a beer, and I'll have a very long talk about that later. But that's very much not for this conversation. And then Blue Sky came. And Blue Sky is a very different model. Like, if you want to describe how Blue Sky technically works, like, there are going to be conversations about that. Super interesting. But I try to make sense of it as a conceptual model where there's like this one giant data lake. Like there's all these, well, the technical term PDSs, and they just exist somewhere, and a social app can just tap into that. And that might become a community, that might become a sense of place, that might become, like, we're starting to only just now start to get a sense of, okay, what is even a community on Blue Sky? What is a community on AT-Proto? We have, for example, Black Sky. They're trying to build a community. Amazing, very much recommended you check out. And we're still struggling to describe Black Sky as like, it's a group of people, but it's also a custom feed. Maybe it's also a social app. We don't even know yet, really. Like, we know that it's a group, similar to, like, we're going to have a conversation directly after with Andra about also, again, like, how do you build communities on AT-Proto? This is new. We don't really have, what I'm trying to get here, we don't really have the full language of it yet. Same, what are places, even? What I described earlier as, like, a social app, turns out that's, like, actually a collection of very different senses of software. It's a relay, it's an app view, it's labelers, etc. And they have like the type of people who put googly eyes on Raspberry Pis, they realize like, hey, that app view, you can split it up into even more components. And it gets like, I'm ashamed, it's a shame that Phil's not here. We're missing the language of describing what this social app is when it turns out that you can split it up into very many different components. And that's why we're here. We're connecting policy, we're connecting public, we're connecting the tech together, because we need to build, like, together in a way of, how do you say this? There's very much interest from like the public policy side, like, building social networks is very much in the collective mind of, hey, maybe it's not great that tech billionaires like the oligarchs run our social networks. We need something different. That's why we have a conversation with the Safe Social people, for example, later this morning as well. Like, there's this broad awareness in the public conversation of, hey, we need to do things differently. And we're doing things differently here with Blue Sky, with the atmosphere, but we need to be able to explain that. And it's even harder when we don't ourselves are only just starting to get a sense of what this thing here is. Because so far I've only talked about mainly about Blue Sky, but we're going to have talks with Tangled, for example. You can build completely different things. You can build a GitHub competitor on AT Proto. How does that relate back into the conversation of hey, we want to build an independent, decentralized social internet? Another practical example. Recently, Blue Sky hit the accounts of certain Turkish protesters at the demand of the Turkish government. This got a significant amount of media attention, which understandably so. It's a very difficult trade-off decision that Blue Sky had. The Blue Sky PBC, I'm using PBC, Public Benefit Company, to refer to the company specifically. It turns out that people get a sense of oh, I don't like that when a social app is censoring protesters. But the technical side hit a very much more interesting, complex conversation where what turns out they're doing is they hid the protesters from view only in Turkey and only specifically on the Blue Sky app. You can run flashes or skeets. We're having a conversation with Sebastian Vogelsang later today as well. And you log in with skeets within Turkey, you see these protesters. And that's a very concrete example of how the design decisions, how we're trying to understand how this network works, have a very real impact on public policy of how this works in the world. And we're just starting to find out. That's why we're having it here. That's why I'm super excited to have you all here on the AHOY. We're building a shared language. We're building it as we're doing. The direction of the network is still wide open. That's why I voted down. Maybe it turns out that Blue Sky, that we're the new direction of the atmosphere is going to get very much into apps, into clients. Maybe it's way more into the server side, the app views. What is the core direction on where moderation happens, for example? I thought until pretty recently that the core direction of moderation was very much on the app view, the app view Blue Sky or Spark. We're also having a very exciting conversation with the people from Spark. Where's Joe? Awesome, perfect. I thought that moderation was going to happen there. And then I wrote last week about the situation in Turkey, and I realized oh, maybe the conversation about moderation actually happens way more on the client than on the app. I follow this stuff closely because I write about it every day. I find it very hard to find formulate a good answer for that. And that's why we need you all here together to go from all different directions, both from the tech builders, the policy people, everybody in between, to get you all together to build this shared language of oh, where are we even going? We don't even know yet. And that's honestly, to me, one of the most exciting things to be here together, to realize hey, this is a network where the direction is still open. The possibilities are still open. We can shape this all together. And for that shaping all together, thank you all for being here.